All right, so we're going to look at some more details about this Riemann sum. So the function does need to be continuous because remember, I'm building rectangles, right? Building rectangles, so it has to be able to have a function that I build the rectangles to, but the function does not need to be above the x-axis. So sometimes I can build rectangles below the x-axis. So let's see what that means. So here we have sine of x. So we can quickly draw sine of x. Okay, there's 0 to 2 pi. So I'm looking between pi over 4. So that would be here, right? And you know this is pi over 2. And then this would be pi. And this would be 3 pi over 2. And this would be 2 pi, right? Okay. So so 7 pi over 4. Sorry, I meant to draw where 7 pi over 4 was. So 7 pi over 4 is here, right? Okay, so I am looking for what is the width of my rectangles if I have 7 pi over 4 subtract pi over 4 divided by 6. So this gives 6 pi over 4 divided by 6. Oh, pi over 4. How convenient. Okay, so each rectangle is of width pi over 4. So here, between here and here is rectangle 1, and then between here and here would be rectangle 2, right? This would be 3 pi over 4, and this is rectangle 3, so this would be 5 pi over 4, so there will be rectangle 4, rectangle 5, and rectangle 6. Okay, so I see the edges, or see where my rectangles can be, so I'm using right-hand endpoints. Okay, so between these two edge points, I'm using the right-hand endpoint, so this is the first rectangle. Between these two edge points, I'm using right-hand endpoint, so this is my second rectangle. The third rectangle, pi, is my right-hand endpoint, so there's no rectangle. The fourth rectangle, this is my right-hand endpoint, so I go down here to get this. For the fifth rectangle, these are my two edge points, so I use this right-hand endpoint. And for my sixth rectangle, right-hand endpoint gives me this. All right, so now I'm going to find the right-hand endpoints, 6 rectangles. So the width of the first rectangle is pi over 4, and then the height will be f of pi over 2, plus width of pi over 4, height of 3 pi over 4, plus pi over 4 f of pi, we know that's going to be 0, oops, plus, not equal, plus pi over 4 f of 5 pi over 4, pi over 4, and we're on f of 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on the fifth rectangle, so we're on f of 3 pi over 2, and then the sixth rectangle is pi over 4, f of 7 pi over 4. Okay, the function is sine of x, so let's go finish it off. So sine, I'm just going to take time to write it out, sine of pi over 2, sine of 3 pi over 4, sine of pi, sine of 5 pi over 4, sine of 3 pi over 2, and sine of 7 pi over 4. Okay, so I really could factor this pi over 4 out. So sine of pi over 2 gives me 1, plus sine of 3 pi over 4 gives me root 2 over 2. This gives me 0. This gives me negative root 2 over 2. This gives me negative 1. And this gives me negative root 2 over 2. So what do I get in here? See, I see that the two 1s cancel. I see 2 of the root 2 over 2's cancel. So I'm left with negative root 2 times pi over 8. Negative, yes. So what that means is the areas of these 3 rectangles that are below the x-axis that gave me negative quantities is bigger than those rectangles. So because of the nature of how we're computing the area, so the area, say, of the fourth rectangle is pi over 4 times sine of 5 pi over 4. So the area of this one rectangle is negative because it's below the x-axis. So the actual sine function gives us the negative sign.